Welcome to The Method, real talk for real people, and this is your announcer, always me, Dee Marie, coming straight at you from Perkins School of Theology on the campus of Southern Methodist University. And if you're excited like I am to be here, let me hear you make some noise! This episode of The Method is sponsored by Better Community Development Incorporated, The Business Experts, Denman Hamilton and Associates CPAs, and St. Andrew United Methodist Church Little Rock. It's time for the talking to begin, y'all. You're listening to The Method, real talk for real people from SMU. We're back for the final round of The Method, real talk for real people here at Perkins School of Theology. Yeah, and it's going to be informative and a wonderful show. And we're going to talk about moral leadership and the importance of it with our resident bishop, D. Max Whitfield, and a professor of moral theology, Dr. Hugo Magallanes. I need to let our listening audience know that The Method, real talk for real people, is an Opportunity Knox production, and that the opinions discussed here are those of the participants of The Method and not that of Perkins School of Theology or Southern Methodist University. The Perkins community is allowing for us to have this conversation in hopes of starting action to transform the world. So before we get started, I'd like to give a special shout out to Reverend Connie Nelson, as always, and Ms. Tracy Allreed and the Perkins Student Association for the support, and express my appreciation on behalf of the staff and the crew of The Method. But before we go on with the show, I'd like to introduce my lovely co-host to our listening audience in Arkansas. They know her as the voice of the Business Experts, Denman Hamilton and Associates. So let's give it up for the awesome Miss Emily Robnett. What's up, Emily? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dee. How are you?
Okay, so besides the radio commercial for Denman Hamilton and Associates CPAs, you're going to tell us a little bit more about yourself, you know, your degree program and, you know, what you want to be when you grow up and stuff?
Well, I am a second-year Master's of Divinity student here at Perkins School of Theology, and I'm seeking ordination as an elder in the United Methodist Church.
Which conference?
The Oklahoma Conference. Dee, I heard a rumor that this is going to be your last show with The Method. Say it ain't so.
Girl, it's so. But I'll be in the background working on other projects that I have to do with The Method because, you know, I can't do everything, but I'm excited to present the next generation of game changers to our listening audience, and these young people will be able to take The Method to the next level, and there's just so much that I need to do, and you know, I have to kind of focus on school and things like that, and I got a lot going on right now, but the show must go on, and I know that Chris and my babies, they're going to do a good job. It's customary on The Method to start each show with wise quotes from famous people, and Emily is going to share those with us and open up the floor for discussion and reflection. You think you can handle that, Emily?
Sure, Dee. We have a special guest for our first segment. I'd like to introduce him to our listening audience in Arkansas before I read wise quotes from famous people. Dee and I both had him for church in the social context, and I'm in his moral theology class right now. We have Reverend Dr. Hugo Magallanes with us today. Dr. Magallanes got his PhD from Drew University and is the director of the Center for the Study of Latino and Christianity and Religions. He's an associate professor of Christianity and Cultures. His teaching specialties are Christian ethics, cultural studies, John Wesley social ethics, Hispanic theology and ethics, and liberation theology. Dr. Magallanes is an ordained elder in the South Georgia Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. So please help me welcome our professor, Dr. Magallanes. Now let's get this show on the road. Here are some wise quotes from famous people on the issue of doing the right thing. If I can start my day out by saying my prayers and getting myself focused, then I know I'm doing the right thing. That 10 minutes helps me in every way throughout the day. Mark Wahlberg. Real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing that nobody's going to know whether you did it or not. Oprah Winfrey. You know, my family and friends have never been yes men. Yes, you're doing the right thing. You're always right. No, they tell me when I'm wrong, and that's why I've been able to say who I am and stay humble. LeBron James. I follow 3 rules. Do the right thing, do the best you can, and always show people you care. Lou Holtz. Dr. Magallanes, could you give us your insight on the quotes I just read?
Sure, absolutely. I think it is pretty interesting, the selection of these 4 quotes, particularly as they are identified as wise, but in my opinion, they are more popular than wise for a number of reasons. These 4 quotes, I think they reflect different ways of thinking. In our society, I think this is pretty common, that people have certain ideas about certain things and then they just simply reflect on those and share their opinions about what they think is right and wrong. In reality, I think many persons do not have a clear understanding in how they arrive at the conclusion of what is right and what's wrong. And I think we need to take a look at serious ways of understanding theology and morality, trying to arrive at the conclusions what's right and what's wrong. Let's take the first one, for example. If I can start my day out by saying my prayers and getting myself focused, then I know I'm doing the right thing. That 10 minutes helps me in every way throughout the day. I wonder if 10 minutes are sufficient for persons to make certain decisions. Quote says, I say my prayers. It's not that the person is praying. Probably the person is repeating somebody else's prayer. Is that enough for us to do the right thing? I wonder.
Now, that was very insightful, but I do have a few questions that I would like to ask based on what we've been doing in class. So we know that we can all do something to help people, but on a corporate level, why is it so hard for us to come to a conclusion in a stance in terms of meeting the needs of people and doing what is right in that way?
First of all, let me start by saying that there is a tremendous debate nowadays regarding if corporations are moral agents. First of all, are corporations moral agents? Do they have moral responsibility? Sometimes many corporations say that the moral responsibility tends to be diluted because a corporation, who is responsible for the actions? Is it the board of trustees? Is it the board of directors? Is it the CEO, the CFO? Who is responsible? Can we hold certain corporations accountable for their actions? I think there is precedence for us to think and for us to hold them accountable. For example, the whole country of Germany was held accountable for crimes that were perpetrated during the Holocaust, and they were responsible for those crimes. So we can use that analogy to say, yes, corporations should be held accountable for their actions. So, and now how can we persuade them to be morally accountable and for them to be more responsible toward others? Well, I guess some corporations, they want to attract more customers, and they are doing certain things to promote themselves, that they are socially responsible, environmentally responsible, and they're doing it obviously for profit, but nevertheless, what they do helps people.
All right, I can roll with that, Dr. Magallanes. Okay. But how can we hold our leaders accountable for not doing the right thing?
That is a similar question, perhaps in the negative. What is the right thing? That is a question. Many leaders do what they think is best, and they do a lot of things, and depending on the segment of the population, morality is quite relative in our society, and I think that's what I think it is important for us to have some grounds and some information in terms of how to make certain choices. There are some leaders that are absolutely committed, and they think that they're doing what is right, but some people absolutely believe that what they're doing is completely wrong. So that's a very interesting dynamic that we have in the present.
All right, that's a great answer, Dr. Magallanes. Once in class, you said something that went like this: why should we question leaders about the poor and how to deal with poverty when our churches do not care for the poor?
In my opinion, I think holding leaders, secular leaders, accountable is a very difficult in a pluralistic society. Now, when it comes to a church, I think we have a very clear distinctive in our Christian identity that we ought to be committed to serve the poor. So why is it churches are trying to hold secular leaders accountable when churches themselves are not doing the primary thing that it is, being in relationship with the poor, relating to the poor, helping the poor, working with the poor alongside the poor? So I don't think in many cases the church has a moral credibility to criticize leaders for not doing the right thing when the church in itself is not doing what we are supposed to do.
I have a question, a side note question. So as a pastor, should we hold our congregates responsible on how they view the marginalized? Don't hold them accountable for that?
What do you mean by holding them accountable?
When I was at Memphis Theological Seminary taking Christian education, the teacher basically said that the way a person would want to either visit your church or go to your church is to view how you treat the marginalized and how ministries are presented to those that are marginalized. He basically said that if we don't show compassion for the poor, then we're going to end up dealing with some difficult issues within the church?
So basically, what the information that you receive is if a church is not doing something for the poor on behalf of the marginalized, that church is not worthy of me staying there.
Well, I may not be communicating it correctly, but that's how I interpreted it.
I think that the church's role is to reach out to all kinds of persons, to every single person, regardless of their commitment, rich and poor. And I think part of the discipleship process in Christian discipleship is to help persons to understand the importance of relating to God, relating to neighbor, and that means helping the poor in their needs. I think it is a process, and I think it would be wrong to dismiss people just because they don't agree with you or that you're not doing something for the poor.
Thank you, Dr. Meg Gladys. I didn't mean to cut you off, Emily. I think you may have a couple of more questions.
Just one. Before we go to break, when we see leaders that claim to be Christians actively support war, how should we view that? Is that moral?
Again, it all depends whose morality. In the Christian tradition, there are three main understandings of war: crusade thinking, just war, and pacifism. And those Christians who support war and the military, certainly they are within the purview of Christianity. And that's just one of the aspects. What I think it is important is for all of us to understand that that's not the only alternative, that there are also two other moral choices. I would hope that the first one would not be as popular, that is crusade thinking, that there is only one way to deal with evil, and that is to eradicate evil. Just war theories, they even recognize that it's not perfect, but it's a way to find some peaceful solution in the midst of violence. And pacifism, you have an excellent example in the writings of Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who embraced this position to bring about conflict resolution.
This conversation has been awesome. We need to hear a word from our sponsors. But before we go to break, I have one question to ask you. Do you like the method? Let our listeners know you're listening to The Method, Real Talk for Real People from SMU.
Like The Method? Then follow us all the time. Like The Method on Facebook. Hit us up on Instagram or follow us on Twitter at The Method 3. It's easy. By doing this, you are empowered to ask our empowerment guests questions, give us immediate feedback on the show, gain access to empowerment information, see listings of music used for the show, and post pictures or shout-outs. We look forward to your posts and tweets. Thanks for supporting The Method, Real Talk for Real People.
This 30-second empowerment moment is brought to you by the tax experts, Denman, Hamilton & Associates. When it comes to making good financial decisions, it's good to get started on financial empowerment as soon as possible. Start with a budget and stick to it. Try living below your means. Buying things on sale could save you a lot of money. And most importantly, invest your money. Let your money work for you. Make an appointment today with the tax experts. This is KV Knox for the tax experts, Denman, Hamilton & Associates. And we're so glad that Better Community Development is rebuilding communities and restoring lives. Don't forget to like Denman, Hamilton & Associates on Facebook and follow them on Twitter for more tips on financial empowerment.
This empowerment message is sponsored by Better Community Development Incorporated. When we disagree and feelings are hurt, it's really hard to make peace with the person who hurt you. Here are some suggestions that you may want to consider if you want to reconcile. The first thing you might want to consider is getting to the heart of the issue. We need to own up to our mistakes and identify ways to make things better. This is Ruben Abito, Professor of World Religions and Spirituality at Perkins School of Theology. And I'm so glad that the Better Community Development Incorporated supports The Method, Real Talk for Real People.
All right, we're back. You're listening to The Method, Real Talk for Real People, and we've been having a conversation about doing the right thing. And for this segment, I'm going to have a conversation with a very special person. We have our resident bishop, Bishop Max Whitfield, here with us today. Bishop Whitfield, how are you doing?
Doing real fine. It's a great day.
It's a great day. Is it great to be alive?
It's great to be alive. It's the day of the Lord has made.
Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
Amen.
Bishop Whitfield got his bachelor's degree from Arkansas State University. He has a master's of divinity degree from SMU Perkins School of Theology, and he has his doctorate of ministry from Princeton Theological Seminary. Bishop Whitfield is an ordained deacon and elder for the Arkansas Conference. So while serving as a pastor in the Arkansas Conference, he was good at what he did, and he got promoted, and he was served as district superintendent in the Fayetteville and Batesville districts in the Arkansas Conference, and he was elected bishop in the Northwest Texas, New Mexico Episcopal area in 2000 and served there for 12 years. And not only is he the resident bishop here at Perkins School of Theology, but he is also the director for the Center for Religious Leadership, and he is my United Methodist Doctrine and Polity professor this semester, and he gives us the business every day in class. But that's all right, because I'm learning a lot. I'm just playing. I'm just messing with you, Bishop Whitfield. You are my friend at this point, and I'm so glad and happy that you're with me. But when I was doing research for this episode, I ran across an article in the Huffington Post that was written by Roya Reed, and she writes what she believes those kind of qualities a trustworthy leader should have. And some of the things that she wrote was that they should have objectivity and fairness, constantly think of others, have a small ego, not hide the truth, and have reasonable expectations. And she also talked about how a morally good leader should stress good morals, have a good sense of humor, and stress accountability. So do you think that those are qualities in a good leader that you would agree with, and why?
Yeah, I think that those are very helpful descriptions of good leaders. I think that one of the areas that I would put forth as essential is the whole issue of integrity. Because I think that unless a person is trustworthy, that no one wants to follow them. It's essential that what we begin to say, what we do, has real integrity, and where we're going is where people want to go as well. And so it becomes essential that that issue of integrity is in place and remains in place.
So how can we keep that in place?
Well, I think that comes from several different areas, one of which is going back to earlier comment, that you have to take care of your own relationship to God and Jesus Christ, and to be grounded in how our Lord lived and taught and carried out his work, how he related to people. It's not simply a show time, but rather it's that constancy of the way that we live that demonstrates that what we are saying matches up to the way we're living. And so I think that that becomes an essential ingredient. People will not follow unless they trust you. And without that trust, one cannot truly lead. You can force people to do things for a period of time.
Like a dictatorship?
Or like a dictatorship.
Like in your class?
Right. I hope
I'm just playing, Bishop Whitfield. I'm just playing. I'm just trying to make it funny. I just got jokes today. You know, I'm sorry. I love you, though.
Well, I think that a leader does have to hold people accountable for the mission of the institution, for the mission of the class, or for the mission of the church. And so that we're constantly keeping in front that it's not what we're wanting for personal gain, but it's rather how can we most effectively accomplish the mission that's been set before us.
Dr. McGinnis, would you like to respond to that as well?
I agree with what Bishop Whitfield said. I think he's right on target in regards to integrity. There is an excellent book that I read several years ago. It's The Ethics of Authenticity. And it's a fantastic book that says exactly what he's describing, the importance of trust in relationships and how a leader should be trustworthy. But I'd like to talk about the first point number one, objectivity and fairness. And my first question would be, according to who?
Why you always challenging me? Ask Roya Reed.
No, well, objectivity, what is that? Who says what's objective and who says what isn't? Mm-hmm. Objectivity, in my opinion, is subjectivity imposed by some people with power and authority to do so. And what about fairness? According to who? What is fair to one leader? What if one leader makes a decision that the company is going to be cutting 50% and the lower half of the employers are going to be dismissed? Is that fair?
Okay, then, but Dr. McGinnis, if you say that, he keep talking, more questions pop in my mind. So how can we, it's my job, right? So how can we, develop standards? Because I know when you say it's subjective, it's based on the perception of the individual. That is what you mean, correct?
Well, what I mean is all of us have an idea of what's objective, but that is pretty much connected to our social context, our background.
Okay.
And it is difficult to make a universalized claim of what's objectivity, particularly in a pluralistic society.
It is. So what we going to do?
We need to start talking and sharing our lives and finding ways to connect one another and to be honest and authentic with one another, as Bishop said. That's integrity. Be open and honest about our differences in the way that we handle ourselves.
Okay, so what if somebody came in and said, you know what? I'm a good person, but I smoke weed every day, and I kick it, and I go to work.
I would ask,
would you think that person was a good person?
It all depends who defines goodness.
See, okay, because doing that, you're technically breaking the law, right?
In some states, yes.
Not in Colorado, not in California.
That is correct.
But anyway, I'm just saying, it's almost like a gray area the way that you're describing it. Is it gray?
What I'm describing is the nature of our society. It's highly individualistic. I do what I want, and I think it's right, and it's my business, and you don't have to mess with it.
But we can't be that way. We have to live in community, don't we?
That is correct.
And that's the only way we can improve moral integrity, by living in community, maybe?
That's not a choice. We all have communities. We all are part of different communities. The person that you're describing has a community of friends that do the same thing, and there are so the question is, what is the church doing as a moral community in reaching out without accusing, without telling them that we have the objective truth, in reaching out to the other persons with honesty and sincerity and authenticity, saying, we love you the way you are. Come and join us to see if you like it.
Well, I have another question now that you said that. Have you ever heard this expression, you guys? This is open to anybody, but I would really like for Bishop Whitfield and Dr. McGinnis to respond. Why y'all laughing? Okay, now, this is what my mama used to tell me, and I used to tell my daughter this when she made me mad. My mama would say, do what I say and not what I do. As leaders in the community, I know Bishop Whitfield touched on it, in the church, if we're leaders, Christian leaders in the church and the community, why is it so important for our lives to match our message? I know that Bishop Whitfield said that develops trust, but is trust enough?
Well, I don't think that trust is enough in that regard, but I think it's foundational to start. Anytime there's a divergency between what we say and what we do, people will say, I don't want to follow you because what you're saying leads one direction and what you're doing leads in a very different direction from what you say you want to accomplish. And so if we're wanting justice within the community and we're acting as if in an unjust way, punishing people who are giving their very best, doing what they believe is called upon, then people look and say, you don't really believe in justice. And I think that the kind of things that were being said, justice then has to be defined so that there is clarity about where we're going and what we're trying to accomplish. But if we're saying one thing, doing another, well, the truth of the matter is we're going to follow what we see rather than what people are saying. Unfortunately, we see that with parents who say, don't speed, you can kill yourself, kill others, and then drive our cars 30 miles above the speed limit. Children learn from that very quickly, and so what do? They follow what they see rather than what we say. And I think that that's true within the church. If we're saying that we include everyone, we want everyone, and then in turn what we do is to say to folks that come that are of a different color of skin or different socioeconomic class or different language, why don't you go somewhere else? People see that very quickly and say, what they're saying is not living up to what they're doing. We really need to go a different direction.
Would you like to respond, Dr. McGinnis?
No, I agree with Bishop Whitfield, and absolutely, I think it is very important for us to be consistent with what we say, who we say we are, and the way that we express ourselves. The example that you mentioned about parenting and a parent saying something to a child, many churches act like this. They preach one thing and they do something completely different.
Well, it's that time again, and we need to hear a word from our sponsors. You're listening to The Method, Real Talk for Real People from Perkins School of Theology.
All right, we're back, and we're here with Bishop Max Whitfield and Dr. Hugo Magallanes, and we've been talking about moral leadership in the community on multiple levels. and I'd like to open up the floor for discussion with our empowerment guests and audience.
You were talking about good moral leadership and how oftentimes that requires authenticity and sometimes consistency. But I'm wondering if as cultural conditions change throughout time and we have different ideas of what is moral and how to treat people, say, the huge difference between how majority of culture acts now versus how we acted in the 60s, would it be moral for somebody to be consistent, to have ideals that remained steadfast through the changes of time? And a good example of this, as I was just mentioning, is I was listening to an NPR episode of Fresh Air. It was an interview with Hillary Clinton late last year, and I'm sorry, I can't cite it any more than that, but the host asked Hillary why her position on homosexuality has changed, and she said, well, because culture has changed. And it does bring up an interesting concept of, as we have new ideas of what oppression looks like, does that change what our morals are? And if a leader changes their position on something, does that mean that they are not a good leader?
First of all, I think that's an excellent question, and a question that deals with morality, cultural relevancy, and leadership. I think the first question that I would ask, and again, you see how I approach these things, I ask more questions than I give answers, it is, why is a leader changing his or her mind? Is it because the leader wants to obtain more votes and become more popular, or is it as an act of humility, recognizing mistakes of the past, say, I was wrong and I'm unwilling to admit my mistakes, and for the sake of the other and for the sake of the marginalized, I'm willing even to lose an election and stand in what I believe is right because culture has changed. Now, many leaders and politicians do it for reasons self-preservation, and they want to promote themselves. To me, that is not humility. Perhaps a humble person is one that is willing to admit mistakes and to say that's authenticity, that's honesty. Say, yes, I was wrong for these reasons, and now I see things in a different way for these reasons. And even though I may not be popular with some persons, I am willing to commit to this cause because I believe it is right.
I think that that's extremely helpful in that regard. I see this in an area where we look at discrimination and how we treat individuals. And for a number of years, I found myself saying, well, I'm not discriminating at all to other people, until someone said, well, what about white privilege? And I suddenly said, well, what do you mean white privilege? And they said, well, can you drive down the highway and expect that you will be treated appropriately by a police officer? Or if by the color of your skin, are you likely to be pulled over and stopped and questioned, or even more so, harassed simply because of the color of your skin? And I suddenly realized, no, I'm not going to be pulled over and stopped simply because of the color of my skin. And then in talking with Dr. Walker this week, told about his own experience of driving cross country. He said, I drive at night so that I will not be stopped simply because people look at the color of my skin and say, why in the world is he driving through this community at this time of day? And so that's white privilege, and it changes the whole understanding of how we can discriminate without even realizing that we're discriminating.
All right, you've been listening to The Method, Real Talk for Real People. This episode of The Method is sponsored by Better Community Development Incorporated, restoring lives, rebuilding communities. The Business Experts, Denman, Hamilton and Associates CPAs. Make an appointment with the business experts today. And St. Andrew United Methodist Church, Little Rock, where we're people helping people. Executive producer, Kristen Veazey Knox. Produced by Deborah Bell, Chester Jones, C.E. McAdoo, and William Robinson Jr. Technical director, Doug Pierce. Technical support provided by Perkins School of Theology. The Method, Real Talk for Real People was hosted by Emily Robnett and is written and created by Dina Hamilton. If you want to make a difference in your community, do it by following the G Code. Do no harm, do as much good as you can, and be a good person and be a good neighbor. This is your announcer, always me, Dee Marie, signing off and thanking you for your support and being down with The Method. The Method, Real Talk for Real People is an Opportunity Knox production.